The morning sunlight spilled over the red-bricked walls of Harvard University, lighting the centuries-old corridors with a golden hue. Students hurried along the cobbled pathways, clutching notebooks and coffee cups, lost in their own worlds of ambition and competition. Among them walked a girl with an old backpack and worn-out sneakers, her brown hair neatly tied in a ponytail, her eyes full of a quiet determination. Her name was Emily Carter. Emily was not like the others. Most of them had fathers who were doctors, CEOs, politicians, or lawyers. Her father, Thomas Carter, was a janitor who had spent 20 years cleaning the very halls where his daughter now walked. He had always told her, "You may not have much, Emily, but you have a mind. And no one can take that from you." Those words had carried her through endless nights of studying under a dim lamp in their small apartment on the outskirts of Boston. It was Emily's first day of the semester, and she had just been accepted into one of Harvard's most prestigious classes, Advanced Ethics and Human Behavior, taught by the famous Professor Richard Wellington. His name was spoken with reverence and fear. He was known for his ruthless intellect and sharper tongue, a man who didn't tolerate ignorance, or what he considered to be mediocrity. As Emily entered the massive lecture hall, her heart pounded. Rows of elegant wooden seats rose in tiers, filled with students dressed in designer clothes, their laptops gleaming like silver mirrors. The faint smell of polished floors mixed with the scent of expensive perfume. She could feel eyes turned toward her, some curious, some dismissive. Her clothes weren't from luxury stores, and her shoes had seen better days. But she kept her head high and found an empty seat in the second row. Professor Wellington walked in minutes later, tall and dignified, his gray hair perfectly combed back. He wore a navy blue suit and carried an air of superiority. Without greeting anyone, he placed his leather briefcase on the desk, opened it, and began writing on the board in large, elegant letters, "What defines human worth?" The class fell silent. The question lingered in the air like a challenge. After a long pause, he turned around. "Well," he said, scanning the room, "this is Harvard. I assume at least one of you can give me an answer worth hearing." Hands slowly went up. One by one, students offered their opinions, some quoting philosophers, others repeating textbook definitions. Wellington listened with mild boredom. Finally, his eyes landed on Emily, who hadn't raised her hand. "You," he said sharply, pointing at her with a piece of chalk. "The one pretending to be invisible. What do you think defines human worth?" Emily froze. She could feel every pair of eyes turning to her. Her throat felt dry, and for a second, she wanted to disappear. But then she remembered her father's words. "I think human worth," she said softly at first, then more firmly, "isn't defined by status, money, or title, but by kindness and integrity. It's how we treat people who can do nothing for us." The room fell silent. A few students shifted uncomfortably. Professor Wellington raised an eyebrow, a smirk playing at his lips. "Kindness," he repeated, almost mockingly. "That's a word I'd expect from a child, not a Harvard student. This is a university of intellect, not a charity sermon." Laughter rippled through the room. Emily felt her cheeks burn, but she didn't look away. "With all due respect, sir," she said quietly, "I think intellect without kindness is dangerous. It can build empires, yes, but it can also destroy lives." The laughter stopped. Wellington's smirk faded, replaced by irritation. He didn't like being challenged, especially not by a student who looked like she couldn't afford even the campus coffee. "And what would you know about empires or intellect, Miss Carter?" she replied. "Emily Carter." "Carter." He repeated her name slowly, as if tasting it. "Interesting. Tell me, Miss Carter, what do your parents do? Perhaps they're philosophers too." The tone was sharp, condescending. Emily hesitated. She knew what he was trying to do. But she also knew who she was. "My father works here," she said simply. "He's one of the janitors." There was a collective murmur among the students. Some whispered, some laughed under their breath. Wellington's eyes lit up with a cruel amusement. "Ah," he said, pacing slowly. "So we have the janitor's daughter in Harvard. That's impressive. Tell me, Miss Carter, how does it feel to sit among people whose parents built the kind of world your father cleans up after?" The laughter this time was louder, sharper, more humiliating. Emily sat still, her fingers gripping the edge of the desk. Her vision blurred slightly, but she refused to let a single tear fall. "It feels," she said softly, "like I belong here just as much as anyone else. My father may clean the floors, but he does it with pride. And every floor he cleaned helped me walk this far." The laughter stopped again. A few students looked away. Professor Wellington's smirk faltered for a moment, but he quickly regained his composure. "Well," he said dismissively, "we'll see if you can prove that your presence here is based on merit and not pity. Harvard has no room for sentimentality." The rest of the lecture went on, but Emily barely heard it. She was lost in her own thoughts, replaying his words again and again. By the time the class ended, her notebook was still blank. As the others filed out, chatting about parties and projects, she stayed behind, waiting until the hall was empty. Then she walked up to the board and quietly read the words he had written, "What defines human worth?" She picked up a piece of chalk and beneath it wrote, "The courage to stay kind in an unkind world." Then she left. The next morning, Emily woke up early. Her father was already gone, his cleaning shift starting before dawn. On the kitchen table was a note, "Make me proud, sweetheart. You already have." She folded the note into her pocket and set off for campus. When she entered class, Professor Wellington was already there, talking to another faculty member. His voice was cold, confident. Emily sat down silently. A few minutes later, he called her name again. "Miss Carter," he said, "since you seem to have strong opinions on human worth, perhaps you'd like to demonstrate them. I've decided to hold a debate next week. You'll be one of the speakers." There was a murmur in the class. She hadn't expected this. "Yes, sir," she replied quietly. "Good," he said. "Your opponent will be Mr. Grant. I'm sure you know him." Of course she did. Edward Grant, the son of a wealthy politician, brilliant and arrogant, just like the professor. The room seemed to buzz with anticipation. The week that followed was brutal. Emily spent every free moment in the library, reading philosophy, history, and ethics. She prepared until her eyes ached and her hands cramped from note-taking. Yet she never told her father what had happened. He was proud that she was at Harvard, and she didn't want to taint that pride with stories of humiliation. The day of the debate arrived. The hall was full, not just students, but professors and faculty members. Even the dean had come. Wellington, seated in the front row, looked amused. Edward Grant went first. His speech was eloquent, polished, full of quotes and data. He argued that human worth was measurable, through contribution, achievement, and intelligence. Society, he said, cannot function if we treat everyone as equal in ability or purpose. The crowd applauded. Then it was Emily's turn. She walked to the stage slowly, her heart pounding, her hands trembling slightly. She looked out at the crowd, the same faces that had laughed at her days ago. Then she took a deep breath. "When I was little," she began, "my father used to come home late, tired, with his hands cracked from cleaning floors. He'd tell me that every stain he wiped away was one step closer to my dreams. He didn't have degrees or wealth, but he had wisdom. He taught me that worth isn't about what you have, it's about who you are when no one's watching." The hall was silent. Her voice grew steadier. If worth were measured by money, then compassion would mean nothing. If it were measured by intelligence, then empathy would be irrelevant. The truth is, human worth can't be measured at all. It's felt, through the kindness we show, the respect we give, and the courage to rise above mockery and judgment. A hush fell over the room. Even Professor Wellington, who had been leaning back with a smirk, slowly straightened. "I was told once," Emily continued, "that Harvard has no room for sentimentality. But maybe sentiment, our ability to feel, is exactly what makes us human. If knowledge is the mind's strength, then kindness is the soul's." When she finished, there was a long silence. Then, one person began to clap. Another followed. Soon, the entire hall erupted into applause. Students stood up, cheering, some even wiping tears. Professor Wellington sat frozen for a moment, then slowly joined in, clapping once, twice. There was no smirk on his face now, only a look of quiet realization. After the debate, as the crowd dispersed, Wellington approached Emily. His voice was low, almost reluctant. "You remind me," he said, "of why I began teaching. I may have forgotten." Emily smiled politely. "Thank you, sir." He nodded and walked away, leaving her standing there, tears threatening to fall, but this time, they were tears of triumph. Later that evening, she found her father waiting for her outside the gates, his janitor's uniform still on, his hands carrying a small paper bag. "I brought you dinner," he said, smiling. "How was your day?" Emily looked at him for a long moment, her heart full. "It was perfect, Dad," she said. "Just perfect." As they walked away from the grand buildings of Harvard, hand in hand, the setting sun painted the sky in gold. And for the first time, Emily truly understood what her father had always meant: greatness had nothing to do with status. It was about the light you carried within, no matter where you came from. That day, the janitor's daughter didn't just silence a room. She reminded it what humanity truly means.